Welcome back to Community and Becoming for the Love of Creatives. Today, it's just one connections and community guy, Dwight. Glad to be with you. I want to talk about something that I see in every heart-centered creative I work with, whether they're painters, writers, designers, performers, or they're just beginning to admit to themselves they may actually be creative. For a long time, I felt I felt it in my bones that there just weren't words for it. And when we don't have language for something, we tend to think, well, I'm the only one struggling with this, or something's probably wrong with me. So today, I want to walk you through what I call the creative journey framework. My hope is that as you listen, you'll be able to locate yourself, breathe a little deeper, and realize you are not behind, you are not broken, and you are definitely not alone. I'm going to walk you through four phases: the doubting creative, the awakening creative, the emerging voice, and the authentic creative. I'm not going to give you step by step how to, because that's the work that we do more personally and more deeply in coaching and in community. Today is about understanding what's happening inside you and why it matters. So, my hope is that as you listen, you can see yourself and stop fighting yourself and start walking your path with more compassion and clarity. As you listen, you might hear yourself in one phase or maybe across several. That's normal. We don't move through these patterns or through these phases in a straight line. You can loop back into earlier phases when you start something new or when life knocks you sideways. So rather than trying to diagnose yourself, I want you to just listen and notice which descriptions feel more like home right now. Where do you feel some grief or relief in your body? Where do you feel a spark of, oh, that might possibly be for me? So let's get into the first of the phases. Phase one is what I call the doubting creative. If this is where you are, I want you to know you're deeply, totally welcome here. The doubting creative has a rich inner world, a lot of ideas, a lot of sensitivity, and almost no trust that any of it really counts. The inner soundtrack is something like, I'm not good enough, or other people are real creatives. I just dabble. Who do I think I am to share this? It's too late for me. You might find yourself consuming more than creating, starting things but rarely finishing, editing or critiquing ideas before they ever see the light of day, watching other people share their work and thinking, I wish I could do that, but feeling frozen when you imagine yourself doing it. I know this phase very well. There was a season where I had stacks of ideas and notebooks and voice memos on my phone, but I wasn't sharing any of it. I would listen to other podcasts and think, they're doing it so beautifully. Who'd want to hear my take on any of that? I'd show up at events. I'd feel like the quiet observer, admiring everyone else's courage while quietly convincing myself that I didn't belong in the same creative planet. Underneath all this, there's something really tender. There's a deep fear of rejection, of being judged, of being misunderstood, and a huge longing to belong somewhere you don't have to perform or pretend. If this is you, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not lazy. You're not flaky. Your system has learned that visibility is risky and it's just doing its best to keep you safe. The problem is the strategies that protect you from rejection also tend to keep you from connection. Why does this matter? Because if you misinterpret doubt as proof that you're not really creative, You'll keep yourself on the sidelines your whole life. You'll wait to feel worthy before you step into community, before you invest in yourself, before you say yes to an opportunity. And that day never magically arrives. So the doubt and creative phase is sacred because it's where the question first surfaces. Am I willing to believe that what I feel inside might be real and worth honoring? Inside For the Love of Creatives, this is one of the reasons that we exist. To be the space where doubting creatives can exhale, be seen, and hear you're not too much. You're not enough. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, and you don't have to walk this alone. Phase two is the awakening creative. If the first phase is like standing outside the door and looking through a window, this phase is that moment when you finally crack the door open and feel a gust of fresh air on your face. The awakening creative starts to feel little surges of energy again. You might get sudden ideas in the shower or on a walk, feel drawn back to an old instrument, a notebook, or a camera. Sign up for a class or workshop or gathering. Whisper to yourself, what if I really am an artist? What if I really am a creative? This phase is exciting and it can be disorienting because once creativity wakes up in you, it doesn't limit itself to your canvas or your keyboard. You start to notice where your life feels too small, too rigid, or out of alignment. You and you want to get more in touch with who you really are. That might show up in your relationships, your job, or even in how you spend your free time. And that can be scary. You might feel like you're too much for the people around you, or you might be afraid that if you follow this pull, everything will have to change. So you oscillate between bursts of inspiration and pulling back into old habits. For me, my awakening phase looked like a slow, persistent ache. I remember sitting in spaces that were technically fine on the surface, but my body felt like it was shrinking. I would come home from events or from my day and feel this whisper inside that said, this is not the fullest expression of who you are or what you're here to create. Around that time, I started saying yes to things that didn't fully make sense on paper yet. Starting this podcast, saying yes to conversations, allowing For the Love of Creatives to be more than just an idea in a journal. It was thrilling and unnerving because part of me wondered, what are people going to think if I really lean into this? Why does this phase matter? Because awakening is vulnerable. If you don't understand what's happening, you might interpret the restlessness and question it as a sign that you're ungrateful or unstable or that you're messing up your life. In reality, this is your creative self saying, I want more truth, more color, more aliveness. This is also where community becomes crucial. The awakening creative needs mirrors, people who can say, yes, I've been there. No, you're not crazy. So it's allowed to feel this big. Let alone in this phase, it's easy to gaslight yourself back into the doubting creative. In my work with creatives, a huge part of what we do here is normalize the awakening and help you hold it with care instead of panic. Phase three is the emerging voice. This is where that inner creative identity starts to move out into the world in visible ways. You may still have doubt, but something has shifted. The pull to express yourself in your own way is starting to feel stronger than the fear of standing out. You might notice yourself sharing your work more publicly, saying yes to collaborations or events, starting a project that carries more of your story and your values, admitting to people in your life With less apology, I'm a writer. I'm a photographer. I'm a creative. This phase feels both exhilarating and terrifying. It can look like posting your art and then wanting to delete it 10 minutes later, giving a talk or leading a workshop and then replaying every sentence in your head afterward, feeling intensely exposed when people actually respond and say, "This moved me." I remember the first time that I released a podcast and felt very close to the tone. It was just ideas and questions. It was my story. When I hit publish, I honestly wanted to crawl under a blanket and hide. Part of me was convinced I'd gone too far, that I'd been too much, that people would quietly unsubscribe and move on. Instead, what came back were messages from creatives saying, "I thought I was the only one who felt that way." Or, "Hearing you say that out loud gave me permission to admit it to myself." That's the emerging voice experience in a nutshell. The terror of being seen, and then the relief and connection that happens when your truth lands where you need it to land. Why does this phase matter? Because this is often where people either shrink back to what feels safe or step in deeper into their authenticity. The risks feel bigger because your heart is visible. The feedback you get or don't get hits closer to home. Without the right support and context, you might confuse silence with failure or constructive feedback with proof that you should never have tried in the first place. This is where a nurturing community and healthy mirrors are everything. The emerging voice needs spaces where vulnerability is honored, where feedback is kind and specific, where other people are also walking that edge of being seen. Inside For the Love of Creatives, we see over and over that when emerging voices are held well, they're more likely to stay true to their own voice instead of contorting themselves to please algorithms, trends, or expectations. And part of my work as a coach and as a host of this podcast is to sit with people right in this phase and ask, what's your voice really wanting to say? And where are you still editing yourself to be more palatable, more marketable than you actually are? Phase four is the authentic creative. This is not a finish line or a place where you never struggle again. This is a phase where your relationship with yourself and your creativity fundamentally shifts. The authentic creative has learned, often through a lot of trial and error, that their worth is not riding on every single piece of work. They begin to trust their own instincts more deeply, say yes and no from alignment instead of fear, let go of some of the constant need for external validation, create work that feels true to who they are, not just what they think people want. In this phase, the emotional tone isn't, "I'm always confident." It's more like, "I'm scared, but I'm still willing." That piece didn't land the way I hoped, but it doesn't erase my voice. I can resist without losing or I can rest without losing my place. I want to be really honest, and I still visit all of the other phases. There are days I feel like the doubting creative again, or I'm awakening to some part of myself that feels wobbly. But more and more, I notice that I come back to this authentic creative place sooner. Recently, I had an opportunity that both excited and intimidated me. Old me would have obsessed over every detail, worried about being chosen, and read way too much into the outcome. The more authentic version of me was able to say, does this line up with my values and the way I want to serve creatives? And when the answer was yes, I showed up and did my best from that place instead of from a desperate need to prove myself. That's a big part of what this phase feels like. You're still human. You still feel all the feelings, but you're more anchored to who you are. The authentic creative often becomes an anchor in community. They encourage others. They model vulnerability and resilience. They remind people that you can be both tender and powerful. Their work usually carries more impact because it's coming from a place of integration, not performance. And that aligns so closely with what our community is about. Creativity as a way to foster connection, healing, and positive change, not just as content to feed the machine. Why does this phase matter? Because many of you listening already have a glimpse of this. You've had moments where you shared something real and felt the resonance. You've had the seasons where you felt in flow, where you were connected, where you could see the difference your creativity made in someone's life. The authentic creative phase is about making that less of a rare accident and more of a way of being. Bringing it together. Where are you right now? Take a breath with me. As I walk through the doubting creative, the awakening creative, the emerging voice, and the authentic creative, where do you feel that inner, yes, that's me? You might have felt it in your chest, in your throat, in your gut. Maybe you're deep in the doubting creative phase, watching from the sidelines and wondering if you've ever been allowed to call yourself creative. In the awakening creative phase, feeling like everything inside you is stirring and that both excites you and scares you. The emerging voice phase, sharing more and feeling more exhilarated and exposed. Or in the authentic creative phase, wanting to root more deeply there and be an anchor for others too. Wherever you are, you're not behind. You're on a path that thousands of other heart-centered creatives are also walking, even if from the outside, it looks like they have it all together. And this is the key. You are not meant to walk it alone. Mm-mm. You're definitely you're definitely meant to find answers in community. I said earlier that I wasn't going to give you a step-by-step how-to in this conversation. There's a reason for that. The how is personal. It depends on your story, your nervous system, your responsibilities, your dreams. That's what we explore in depth in coaching and workshops and experiences. My work through For the Love of Creatives is to create spaces where this whole journey is held with compassion and structure. Spaces where doubting creatives are validated and invited in. Awakening creatives are supported in navigating the questions and changes. Emerging voices get the kind of feedback and community that helps them stay true to themselves. Authentic creatives get to lead, mentor, and continue growing in a way that feels sustainable and real. If you're listening and you're thinking, I don't want to keep doing this in my head by myself, there are a few ways we can walk together. If you recognize yourself in the doubting creative or the awakening creative and you want a safe place to tell the truth about where you are, I offer limited one-on-one coaching spots. That's where we look at your specific story, your fears, your longings, and we start to gently untangle what's been holding you back and building a path that honors where you are. I'll share how to connect with me in the show notes. If you're in leadership or you host spaces for creatives and you're thinking, my people need this language, we need to talk about this honestly together. I love coming into communities, organizations, conferences, and teams to talk people through this framework live. Every time I share it in a room, it opens up conversations that people didn't even realize they were hungry for. If you'd like to explore bringing this talk to your group, there's a way that you can reach out that's linked in the show notes. And of course, stay connected with For the Love of Creatives. Keep listening to the podcast. Join the email list And keep an eye out for gatherings and workshops when we open up new spaces. You'll be the first to know. I want to end with this. Wherever you are on this journey, please hear me. Your creative self is not a luxury. It's not an extra. It's part of who you are, part of what you're here to bring into the world. You don't have to earn your way into being a real creative. You already are one. And in a world that can feel divided and unwelcoming, we need your authentic voice, your particular way of seeing, your courage to connect. Thank you for letting me sit with you today. And if this conversation spoke to you, share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their creative journey. Until next time, keep listening to that quiet inner voice. And remember, you don't have to walk this path alone.